Finally, I recently got around to seeing director Lee Daniels' Black Consciousness film from 2013 called The Butler, starring Forest Whitaker, looking looking like he's aging fairly well and looking a little slimmer and trimmer than I remember as the title character. The movie chronicles that character's career at the White House, bringing good stiff drinks to president after president. When somebody wants to nuke us, or one race in our country wants to nuke another, basically. Uh, and actually, I believe I remember when it first came out, someone told me that they thought even the beginning, right at the beginning, it was a tearjerker, which is understandable. That beginning does get the movie off to a fairly brisk start, as they fairly quickly explain, how Forrest Whitaker's character comes about his job working in Washington, D.C. as a butler. Of course, we also have Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey and David Oyelowo, who we both saw in the more recent Black Consciousness movie, Selma. They're both in it. One thing I found that was very interesting and even sometimes amusing and pretty well done most if not all the time, I thought, was the casting choices pertaining to the various presidents. I especially liked Alan Rickman as Ronald Reagan. I thought that was real inspired and kind of amusing. They did a good job making him up to look like Ronald Reagan, and I'm like, he looks familiar. Oh, it's Alan Rickman. I thought Jane Fonda, who I could barely recognize, made a classy and adorable Nancy Reagan. Now, on the other hand, well, it was great to see Robin Williams as Dwight Eisenhower. You're nothing against John Cusack at all, but I thought that somehow he wasn't really a believable Richard Nixon. I'm like, oh, he's supposed to be Richard Nixon. A lot of us, have seen movies where Richard Nixon is kind of overplayed, like almost like a comedian's overdone impression of Nixon. And I think this movie tried too hard to go the other way. I mean, he was likable as always, but somehow he just wasn't Richard Nixon enough, whereas in most movies, it's too exaggerated. So basically what we have here is, of course, a movie that deals with a lot of the things that affected Americans, black or otherwise, such as the Vietnam War and the riots, such as were the focus of Selma. I also thought that Cuba Gooding Jr., his fairly small part, was one of his better performances. Sometimes Academy Award winner though he is, sometimes he kind of overacts a little bit or mugs too much, and it can be sort of funny, but sometimes it kind of gets a little annoying. And in here he did a good job. They didn't give him too big of a part, and he did a good enough job in which he was likable. So we kind of go through a lot of the different things that affected America with regards to race relations, especially between black and white, and it's seen through the eyes of the main character's family. And of course, Oprah Winfrey does a good, likable job, and David Oyelowo has very smoothly settled into a career playing in playing in various movies. He was in Red Tails, and I recognize him. Some of us recognize him from over a decade ago on the British spy drama Spooks, which for some reason was released in America and reportedly in France under the title MI5. That might be more familiar to those of you that might have caught it on in reruns on PBS. Long story short, the Butler is probably a tearjerker for many people. It is, it goes on for almost 3 hours. It doesn't overwhelm its stay. And what else can I say? I mean, it moves along at a well enough pace, which is especially important, because of that long length. So in a nutshell, this is very recommended. I wanted to see it for a couple of years. It's been very much worth the wait, and I think maybe it's even a bit crisper and tighter than Selma, and it's a little longer, but I think it was a little bit more tightly done. So anyway, that's my review of The Butler.